Hi everyone, this is Carrick from ACG, and today I'm sweaty, covered in grime, and might have a stomach full of dog food as I bring you the review for Mad Max, or as I like to call it, Warren G and the Hunchback of Notre Dame got to regulate. All kidding aside, this is Mad Max, the game based in the same fictional universe of the original movies and the most recently released Fury Road, a movie about Charlize Theron starring her sidekick Max. But in Mad Max, the video game by Avalanche Studios, we see Max losing the black on black, his car with the odd name, and basically going in search of new wheels. Actually, not in search of, because he gets new wheels right away, but instead, like some kind of neurotic designer Goldilocks, Max needs a vehicle that is just right. So for the next 20 to 40 hours, you run, gun, drive, dive, dodge, stab, and pile drive, and shiv enemies, so that you can steal the change from their pockets, melt it down, and make that awesome giant car bumper you've always wanted. Mad Max is part racer, part on-your-feet adventure game, telling the story of events that aren't directly connected to Fury Road, which means Max actually talks in this one instead of occasionally grunting and pointing at things. Does Mad Max effectively channel the spirits of the original's dire and dark world, bringing to life men with horns on their crotches in stunning realism? Or does it end up being nothing more than roadkill on the side of some forgotten freeway, a bloated mess filled with the parasites of bad open-world game design? Let's check it out and see. So here's the review for Mad Max the video game. The continuation of today's hot rod religions, harpoon gun mounts, high-speed chases, a 100-to-1 male-to-female ratio, and fixing your car the Han Solo spouse abuser way, by just beating the crap out of it until it works. Today, graphics are first. Admittedly, the game looks damn pretty, using various special effects to give the desert a less boring, hey, here's some sand, oh look, and here's some more sand kind of look. Even on the consoles, the game looks damn good, and Avalanche seemed to have fixed the pop-in between the preview build and the review build even, resulting in a game about 60,000 times easier on the eyes. And no, that's not an exaggeration. Originally, plant life popped up in front of you like friggin' Marvel movies, just unwanted and nothing but filler. Here, now everything is much smoother when it comes to level of detail and draw distance, and there's a high attention to detail and making sure that the world feels alive. Not necessarily real, but alive. For example, roads split, meander, and wind and thread around the world like some kid with a set of crayons, 2 pounds of methadone, and a free weekend designed the world. That's not to say it's not real looking and feeling, it is, but as you're racing across a desert floor and the road just suddenly splits like a friggin' Wile E. Coyote cartoon, only to form back up 300 feet in front of you, like it can't decide if it's having a stroke or just a really good time, it can feel odd, but it sure does add to the excitement. Overall, the world design is highly interesting, if a bit chaotic, and racing down a road with enemies hot on your heels as the car is just burning around you never really got old. While resolution is fine, and though there are some low-resolution textures in specific places, like some rock formations, Avalanche did a pretty good job with a world that is basically ground-up dry glass and dirt, and most likely a couple second-place finishers, because here, second place is dead. Now, sadly, on the consoles, that doesn't always work out perfectly, especially for the frame rate, because though it's fine most of the time, occasionally it takes a backseat prom dive to the low 20s before evening back out, only to dip its head back down pro style without any warning. For the most part, it's fine, and you can run long stretches and not see it dip, but god damn it gets ugly when it starts to falter. Where Mad Max truly excels, though, is its reflection of a fiction on its world. Characters look like they haven't bathed in about a century, materials are pitted through with rust, everything is a desiccated corpse of its original self. Of course, that includes Max, who walks around the game world for much of the title's time, just tra-la-la with the blood and gore of enemies all over his mug, I just got done eating someone style. Sup, man? You got some salvage? Oh, this is just what's left of that dude I splattered on the road last week. The aesthetics of the world continues to its vehicles, though. Ragtag things made of various parts with questionable beginnings, the cars, and there are a great number of them to collect an outfit, are things of monstrous mayhem, with parts always looking like they want to get away from all the other parts. While your main car is customizable, Mad Max once again steps just a bit further and makes some of the other cars have special traits that will see you driving a car around with your trusty canine in back sniffing out mines, delivering loads of scrap via the scrapulence and other activities. Imagine different horses having different gameplay specialties in, say, the Lord of the Rings game, and you sort of get the drift here. It's a great visual change-up as well as a good addition to the gameplay and helps keep you interested in the other cars rather than just your main one. Graphically, I would say the game is excellent, an almost perfect reflection of gameplay on world state, minus the occasional moments where the game forgets what the hell it's doing and drops the frame rate to the 20s or below. Luckily, those with a PC won't run into that problem. Sound, music, and voice.
must reach the plains of silence. To reach them, I need a machine as good as the Black on Black.
As always, sound is up first. If you're a gamer with a subwoofer, and most likely you are, then you're in for a symphony of smashing subsonics, the like of which hasn't been matched in a long time. The sound in this thing is phenomenal. You're going to see people talking about it, and you already do. It's on an almost breakneck race to thunder low-tone booms across your subwoofer, and then soars with the crash of steel or metal rending of a car evaporating under the explosion of a well-placed gasoline tank shot. Then it drops to the middle-level boom of a sniper rifle that itself sort of carries up into the higher spectrum as the bullets crack echoes across the rocks. This thing is magnificent, with various effects playing out all the time, resulting in a blissful and highly atmospheric soundscape that's both informational to the gamer at all times, especially when breaking the bones of your enemies in visceral fist-to-fist fights. But it's also just really tonally accurate. Absolutely tremendous. Up next is music. You know, this was right in the middle. Some of the tracks had an almost Batman-inspired string section with its rhythmic, militant sections played out well during insertion into enemy strongholds. But then its ambient tracks really many times left me wanting. They weren't bad, in fact some were very well done, but both due to the game's design as well as the gameplay itself, the music can get lost and some of the tracks are just fairly bland, more so than one would want, let's say. It was good, but at times it falters with occasional tracks that sound like something you would buy from a Fruity Loops sound sampler. Voice. Now, aside from an accent or two that's off, the game really nails voice, from the craziest shit chum bucket to Max's wayward accent. Speech is both tonally accentuated where it should be, but ultimately enjoyable to listen to. Since a good deal of those that live in the desert and don't drink water are batshit insane, you do get a lot of sing-song portrayals, which is hilarious when you think about it, because these incredibly down-and-out people are just this excited to meet Max, despite not having eaten or drinking anything for days. Ultimately, it's good with a couple hit and misses depending on the scene and the voice actor. I would say overall, good direction. Gameplay. So, Mad Max is a third-person open-world game where you start out small and build your way up Apocalypse Tycoon style, starting with your car. After a short intro, you pick a body for your new vehicle from an assorted group of ugly-ass rides, none of them looking able to stay together above, let's say, 10 miles an hour. You're unleashed fairly quickly on the world, and it's here where Mad Max both stuns with its surprising switch-up of apt gameplay mixes and also falls a bit short at times. Firstly, the driving is a thing of beauty, a dexterous dance between momentum and friction. Every surface in the game impacts the car in different ways. Momentum, top speed, and handling, and the cars have a very realistic weightiness to them that still allows for epic jumps, but also feels far more intrinsically accurate as you play. There really is nothing like jetting up the rocky confines of a valley, pressing nitrous and shooting into the air, landing on the road, turning sideways, and then sideswiping an enemy before he even knew what hit him, watching his body eject out the doorless vehicle, only to be turned into a bag of flesh by smashing into a rock at full speed. The driving is highly accurate, and as you upgrade your new four-wheeled Warrior V8 vehicular slaughter, your weapons become more varied as well. For example, the harpoon gun allows for pulling a car apart a piece at a time like you're undressing an ugly, janky significant other. Upgrading your sniper rifle allows for you to use your vehicle as a mobile reach out and touch someone death factory. And again, in a nod towards gameplay cohesiveness, Max can slip into the back of his vehicle and fire while his best friend and stalwart crazy pal can take over the wheel. It is all incredibly natural. Special moves like a sleeping dog's car body slam exist, but here they have a far more natural animation and progression and result in ultimately rewarding movie caliber disintegration of Detroit's finest vehicles, or at the very least their carbon copy clones. Once you leap out of the vehicle, the on-foot activities range from interacting with the world's numerous inhabitants via a shank first, ask questions never gameplay style, where a good 90% of everyone in the wasteland wants to see you dead, just because it would be funny. And let's be honest, living in the wasteland would most likely be boring when it's not interspersed with rape, eating dogs, and driving over people. The on-foot controls do suffer a bit from interpretation control, with Max occasionally fumble humping structures versus doing what you wanted him to do. Additionally, there's a high amount of platforming in the game. Well, no, there isn't. Yeah, actually there is. But it's not really supposed to be there, because in one of the oddest game design decisions since that Fighting Vipers game put a NASCAR in a fighting game, Max can leap but is apparently afraid his arms are going to fly off if he's over 2 feet above the ground, resulting in the strangest looking and animated jump I think I've ever seen. Couple this with visually enticing spots to get to within the world and you can spend a good deal of time rubbing up against rocks in an uncomfortable hump dance. You see, the world only really lets you climb when it wants to, denoting those locations by having God highlight spots you can climb with a giant yellow highlighted line. Thanks God, but this rock here can be easily jumped to, right? Nope. Additionally cumbersome is the fact that the leap is delayed by a fraction of a second when moving forward, and you can find yourself falling down instead of leaping a 6-inch gap that Max could have just stretched a bit more to get across in the first place. I can only assume, since he lives pretty much in a flatland, he's deathly afraid of heights, which doesn't explain the random hot air balloon rides, but whatever. It's not all bad. In fact, most of it's good. The combat is actually very good. Though comparisons to Batman ice skating combat will be made, here distance judgment is a requirement for the player, and simply hammering the counter or attack buttons, thinking that Max will magically be attracted to the enemy, will result in you pawing out into the open air like a blind man, and then 7 guys shanking you. And that's as bad as it sounds. This results in combat that's both visceral and a little bit more mentally engaging than, say, the Batman titles. I can see some people not liking it, especially if you're expecting to magically pinball around a level and have become accustomed to that kind of gameplay. It's not going to happen here. Now, to do all this crazy fighting, you're going to need to upgrade. Mad Max is heavy on the upgrading. Upgrading Max, the car, your bases, and fighting style all change the game fairly dramatically. For example, upgrading Max results in all kinds of graphical and moveset additions, like being able to counter weapons, wearing brass knuckles, new clothing, and beard tech. While upgrading the car or creating custom cars from a specific list, I guess you should think of that as sort of picking a martial arts style in a fighting game, but replace the fighter with a car that looks like it's made from spare ship parts, and instead of punching people, you harpoon them out of their front seats. Throughout the spectrum, upgrades are both tangible and rewarding within the gameplay. Now, I did find it odd and slightly off-putting that upgrading your car can occur while out in the desert, but that kind of dogmatic requirement to detail probably doesn't need to be adhered to in a game where eating from dead bodies doesn't give you bone-riddling diseases. Now, if you have played any open-world game, you know that activities are like Pokemon to game developers, and they have to get them all. Yet here, Mad Max's offerings are surprisingly tied to the gameplay. Unlike other games where they're collectathons and they aren't even remotely tied to gameplay, except for things like killing 10 bull sharks to make a shark scrotum gun carrier, here Avalanche has done their best to tie together everything, including base upgrading, car upgrading, and character upgrading, and they put those into the gameplay in a more direct fashion, resulting in additional activities around the world having a subtle dexterity to their mirrored upgrades. For example, if you want to upgrade a base with more gasoline, you take over fuel plants in long, fairly detailed missions to kill enemies within them, take out their defenses, and basically make it suitable for your own people to live inside. It's not a huge addition to gameplay, and it's not absolutely fresh, but it's nice to see some additions and extras to at least a somewhat rote activity in the physical world. Lastly, the game revolves around the requirements of gas and water and food, but none of them seemed overly taxing, and it was amazing to feel that. For the most part, it's a far more flexible portrayal of requirements instead of the typical "I'm starving after 3 minutes" gameplay that infects many other titles. It's not there to drive you, nor is it even pretending to do so. Instead, it's there as a single gameplay mechanic, in addition to others, to offer a more interesting worldview. Now, all of this upgrading, fighting, and exploring ties into Max's overall story of getting to his special place. You see, Max is batshit crazy, and thinks some special nirvana exists that's going to grant him peace. Nicely enough, no one within the game world just points at him and says, "Dude, you're crazy." So as you collect mementos, steal vehicles, take down bosses, and basically make yourself more powerful than any warlord, it's all for naught, because the end goal is to give the big desert a middle finger as the end game. I will say this, the gameplay ties to the upgrade system, and their slightly tighter integration really helps the title. Unlike in Assassin's Creed, where a tower is greeted with a groan because it's really not interactable except maybe climbing, here locations like hot air balloons that allow for scouting not only need to be taken out, but possibly released from their moorings, gassed up, and might be under enemy fire from a sniper rifle, resulting in a shorter hot air balloon ride than you may have hoped for. It's this integration at a technical level with the fiction that's so great, and if you can deal with the various stretches and logic that a Assassin's Creed or Batman game provides, or even the recent Lord of the Rings game has, then Mad Max might be right up your alley. Fun factor. You know, held aloft by some excellent gameplay decisions, Mad Max is an absolute blast to play. One moment you're making not just big jumps, but epic jumps, the kind that should have rocket booster attachments to complete, and if landed by a normal human would eject their spine out of the driver's seat like a damn jack-in-the-box. Surprise, you're dead, and you're also nothing but a sack of man sludge. It's all great fun and helped by a weight and traction system that sides on making the cars feeling connected to the desert rather than floating above it like some kind of Bobby Kotick car just lording from on high. The next moment you're sliding across the desert sands, rim deep in thick grip, pulling heavy on the front end, and then the next moment you're infiltrating an oil refinery to set up a fuel upgrade to your base, fighting packs of various warbands with WWE moves, brutal shivings, and crunchy combat style that's going to probably probably confuse a good number of players at first. Here's the real crux of the game. If you sit back and look at other open world games and compare it to Mad Max, it's going to come out looking a tiny bit odd. You're out in the desert a good deal of the time, driving around smashing the shit out of enemies, stealing their pennies and then hammering them into spikes to put on your car to hamper borders. But that's where the game shines. It's an excellent gameplay loop where things make some kind of slightly altered sense, and instead of icons on a map, locations become places, as level design here isn't of the Mass Effect 1 planet variety, but a more complex system of bunkers, chambers, open spaces, and ultimately an eye towards defending what was within that particular area. Luckily, you can fast travel, as the world can get huge fast, and at times you just want to get somewhere. It's no different than any other open world traveling game where you trade that danger or possible reward of crossing a city, fantasy land, or here, a desert, for quicker travel to a mission area. I will say this. The game is almost instantly approachable, has an attention to gameplay and fiction combining in a somewhat at least tangible way, pack that with impactful upgrades, rewarding unlocks, and combat that requires a slightly higher mindset. In the end, those who like Mad Max now have their Batman game, except it's Mad Max, and it doesn't involve tank battles. And in the end, just like those games, it's not perfect, but god damn is it fun. So I rate games on a buy, wait for a sale, rent, or never talk about it, or touch it again rating scale. This is a buy. I absolutely had a blast. I think it is one of the most enjoyable games I've played. It is not without its technical problems, but man, it is really fun. So that's it for me. Big game gets a big review. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, thumbs up. If you did not, thumbs down. And as always, peace out.